So let's start. Today I will talk about value management with a specific from a specific perspective. So that means from an approach. I would not say a framework, an approach that I called EVA. So standing for Enterprise Value Enablement and Realization. You tell me, okay, why a new framework? Well. In fact, I wanted to solve or to address a couple of issues and problem I saw with different customers. So let's start with the first thing. It's related to what I already wrote in the first book I quoted with some other people called ITSM value streams. And I will start with the basic things, how IT works. And it will remind you, some of you who know ITIL version 5, it was created before ITIL version 5, by the way. In fact, this is really basic, I would say, flow of work in an IT organization. We always start with, we mainly start with, from our customer perspective, an idea of an innovation. INV here means innovation, can mean investment. In any case, we have an idea for a new product, for new activities, for any improvement. And from that, it triggers the development of a solution, which is a product that we operate and we deliver services on top of that. That the users are using, or the people are using, the consumers, if we use the terminology of ITIL, and that enable value. This is, in fact, a very simple way of seeing what Ellen already presented as a value stream. And in fact, from that perspective, we know that in order for that to work, we need to collaborate. So we need to have some value streams. The question is always where to stop, where to start, and where to stop a value stream. Where to stop a value stream is always here when there is an idea, where there is a need, and when to stop it. Well, it depends your view on that. So, of course, you can tell me, we end up a value stream when the service and the product and services are delivered. But for me, a value stream ends, in fact, when the value is realized. When the value is realized, and in fact, in many organizations I work for, I say, okay, you have a good idea when you have this idea of this innovating idea of what you expect in terms of value. But at the end of the day, how do you do the loop? How do you really measure the value that is created and from this digital product and services? And that is one of the main reasons why I wanted to address that, because I saw that many organizations didn't have an obvious answer or clear answer to that questions. And one of the things I also noticed in many organizations is that people were not aware in organization of what we call the value leakage. By the time, in fact, you create your idea, you have a value that is proposed. You say, okay, thanks to, I would like to have people to have the possibility to get, 10% of productivity when I look at my competitors, or I would like to get rid of these systems that are old and that cost me a lot of money. So we define, in the business case, the value proposed. But in fact, along the creation of the product, the delivery of the service, we know that at the end of the day, when we start using the services and consuming the services, the value that is realized is far from the value that has been proposed originally. That's what we call the value leakage. It's another thing that many organizations are still not aware of. They are not really aware of this value leakage. Many investments, if I come back here, are based on value proposed. So on one hand, we say, okay, this is the value proposed. We based our return on value in terms of investment on the value proposed. But at the end of the day, what we get is the value realized, which is far less than the value proposed. So there are a couple of things, related to this model of how IT works. And by the way, IT works that way for at least a certain number of decades. So I wanted to set up the scene, and now let's see what is when I said the value problem. Of course, it's a bit provocative. If you know me, I'm a bit an agent provocateur, as we say. So in fact, the first thing we identify in organization is what we call the gray zone of value measurement. So as I said, we are very good in organizations in defining the business case. We are very good in defining the value that is proposed. We are less good in saying, okay, who will now measure the value? Will tell me, yes, well, we have a customer, the customer defined in his business case the value proposed, and it's up to him now to measure the value. That's exactly what you have, for instance, in ITIL, when they said that last step of the service journey, it's what they call the reflect step. You reflect, so that means you measure the value, but it's not very clear. And I said, okay, we have to be clear about that. So the problem that here is that there is a gray zone of that, and the gray zone is that can have different reasons for that. So that means the fact that there is no clear responsibility to track and measure the value realized. It can be a problem of alignment, okay, strategic alignment problem. It can be a problem of, for instance, resource optimization. So in fact, we don't have resources that are in fact related to what we originally wanted to affect. Another big issue is the value definition itself, the value proposition and the value definition. What we talk about value, when we talk about value, the value is, for instance, for who. So before defining, in fact, how you will measure the value, we need to be sure that we have a clear and common understanding of what value is for who, okay? People, and that was the reason why value stream exists, are not very, I would say, keen on collaborating. So that's another reason why you add them some responsibility on top of what they do on the everyday job. So, well, everybody wants to have results without having any activities to do. So it's another reason why there is a gray zone of value measurement. Okay, and in fact, this gray zone, as I said, can be explained by different reasons. I will not go into all the details of this, but this is, I would say, one of the main issue in many organizations, because in many organizations you are sure of one thing, is that you spend money. That's the only certainty you have. You spend money on project, you spend money on product, you spend money on services, and the main uncertainty you get is the value from that. So you have a full certainty because you need money to develop, manage, and operate all these products. But at the end of the day, in many organizations, this value that has been promised, proposed, expected is not really measured for different reasons that I already mentioned. So I said, well, there is a discrepancy because you cannot, just manage your organizations in terms of certain investment when you don't know who and how you will measure the real value from that, and how you can compare, in fact, what you have in your business case, if I say like that, and what you get. So another example of that is what I call the so that problem, because you will tell me, yes, David, we know we have a value proposition in the business case. Yes, but in fact, your value proposition is not only at the level of a business case. If you look at that in different perspectives, think about a user story, a simple user story in your product backlog. If you use this, I would say, general syntax of a user story as a role, I want a function so that after the so that you have the value. But in fact, the user story has this so that value expression. But once teams are realizing that, in many cases, in fact, the so that first is not very clear, and in many cases is lost because what you do is that you focus on who and what needs to be done, and the so that disappear. So what you have after the so that disappear, it's another value leakage. So at the end of the day, what you do is that you keep creating features and you keep losing the reason in terms of value why you do that. So that's the so that problem. If we continue, and of course, I know that there are some people aware of agile or being very, I would say, experienced in agile. What I said previously leads to that element. The agile paradox is the fact that the more you deliver features, the more you create value. No, it doesn't work like that. It's not because you have this iterative and incremental approach that you will have more value. That's what's meant in the agile manifesto and in agile. Iterative and incremental mean that you don't do everything at once. At each iteration, you increment the value. But what do organizations do? Increment features. Okay, so you have new features, new releases, developed and implemented, at the end of iterations. But it doesn't mean that each iteration will lead to some value. It will lead to new features, and new features is not equal new value. So based on all these elements, the fact that we have unclear view on where the value is lost, unclear value or idea of what the value we talk about is, who will measure that? I said, David, it's time to think about that seriously. So what I tried to do is I try to work and to address the digital value management, I would say, area. And that's why I started to study axiology. So axiology, generally speaking, is the philosophy of value. You will tell me, oh, why do you study philosophy for IT? Yes, because in fact, the philosophy of value gives you quite a lot of information about what value is. And by the way, in this definition of value, you recognize definitions that some of the IT frameworks already use. Value is the worth, usefulness, or merit of something. And this something, in our case for digital value, is digital product and services. In other words, what we can say strictly is that you reach digital value when, in fact, you can really take the decision to sacrifice some of your resources, financial resources, time resources, human resources, for something that's worth it. That would be, I would say, my definition of value. Okay? And when we say that worth it, we need to identify the value. And that's why I say, okay, we have, for instance, the service journey. We have the digital product and service management in ITIL. We have a different framework that exists, but there is no real framework defining, simple stages of what we call the value life cycle. So I said, well, first, we need to identify what the value life cycle is and what are the stages of this value life cycle. And I identify 5 life cycle stages. 5. Okay. The first stage is the value identification. As I said, we have to start from that. We have to be sure that there is a clear and common understanding of what we talk about for who in terms of value. Is it the value for the customer? Is it the value for the provider? Is it the value for a supplier? And again, when you do that, I will not go into the detail, but we will see that you have some specific approaches, some specific activities, some specific processes for that. Okay, so you define stakeholder needs and expectations. And again, you define also their expectations in terms of value. What is the value we expect? Then the second stage we have, and you see intentionally, I don't use a life cycle, like this, I would say, circle approach, but I use it as a perpetual moment. So that means it's an infinite loop. So the second stage would be value planning, okay? And the value planning is when you integrate, in fact, objectives into business strategy. So that means you define now from this value that we expect, how we can address that with digital product and services, and then we deliver them. So we deliver the value. That's what we do in IT service management. That's what we do in digital product and service management. Nothing very new, but we focus on the value perspective on that. And the next two stages are very important because they are, in fact, addressing the main pain point or the main value problems I already mentioned. Value realization. Well, here we have a stable set of activities with roles and responsibilities to measure and validate outcomes. You will tell me, yes, David, we do that. We have SAFE, we have the value management office, we have the PMO, they manage the benefits of project. Maybe, but you have so many value that is leaked. Just think about what I said with the SODAT problem. Okay, addressing the SODAT problem is also making sure that you still track the value from stage one till stage four. And when you compare the value that you realized in stage four with the value that was expected in stage one, you will try to increase the value realized up to a certain level, maximally the level that you had at the beginning in your value identification stage, and that will be value sustainment. So we try to sustain and to adapt and improve the value over time in order to be sure that your investment in digital product and services are still making sense. So this is exactly the approach and one of the pillars of digital value management. So a full life cycle of value with 5 stages. Then, based on that, I'll say, well, let's have a look at how we could architecture this approach of EVA. And in fact, I found 5 main elements. The value register. The value register, it's where you will answer the questions. What is the value I really get from digital product and services? In any time, this information should be stored in the value register. Okay? The value register, what you see here. The value backlog will be, in fact, how can I make sure that I can increase or sustain the value that I have over time? What are the actions that make me do that? Well, all the actions are stored in the value backlog. The value life cycle, any activities that we do are related to stages of the value life cycle that we already discussed. Yes. The value governance. Without governance, you know that cows will manage, and then you will again come back to the situation where nobody knows, in fact, who needs to measure which value for who. So you need governance in place, and of course some principle. You will tell me, oh, this David, he just copies ITIL. No. ITIL is about digital product and service management. Here, this approach is about digital value management. So it's something that can be, let's say, combined or that can use a lot of ITSM practices, but it's really from the point of view of value. What is the value we get? How we can increase the value? How we can take the decision that some of our initiatives don't lead to any value? And again, it's not just a matter of flow. Okay, that's why I wanted to have it also in that conference. In that conference, there are a lot of experts in value streams. There are a lot of experts in flow. The idea of that is not a flow issue. The idea is really a digital value management approach. I hope I convince you. And I will also share with you in comment the slide deck. So for the value register, you see, in fact, I just give another view on that. As I said, from the value proposed to the value realized, you have this value leakage. And in fact, each time, on each step, it's, of course, a simplified version of that. But what we do is from the value proposed till the value that is realized, we define, in fact, what can be the value that is identified in each step. And then we store that in the value register. So we know in each time where we lost some value, okay? And each time we know, in fact, what is the value that we can get or we really get from digital product and services. So this is our value register. Think about a safe, a real one, a treasure, where you have stored all the value that you can get from your digital product and services. Okay. The value backlog will be the dynamics. So that means here, when you look at this value leakage, so from the value proposed to the value realized, you see this leakage. And how we can address this leakage by creating some action. So the value backlog here, I'm not very good maybe in diagrams, but the idea of this value backlog is to take some actions. All what you see within this orange part, which is the value backlog, are actions that meant to increase the value realized up to the theoretical level, which is the value proposed. Because when we say, okay, I wanted to change my, old system, and because of resistance to change, I have many users who still force me to use both systems. Well, the value proposed is not there because we still have to buy licenses for the old and the new system. How we make sure that based on OCM, we can discuss and see with users how we can really decommission the old system. And that would be one of the things that we have in our value backlog. So in our value backlog, we have any kind of actions that will make sure that we want to maximize the value realized up to the level that is the value proposed. And it can be some adoption, actions. It can be some actions that are led to triggered by IT, by the business, both. So this is the interesting part of that. We all know what a product backlog is. The value backlog would be any actions that increase or sustain the digital value in an organization. Then we have the value life cycle. In the value life cycle, again, as each stage, I wanted to make sure that we have some actionable activities. So we have some practices, processes, call it as you want, for each of them. I will not go through all of them, but each of them has some specific purpose, a specific value purpose. One that I wanted just to pick from that, because it's also part of what you have in the agenda and of this presentation, is the value level management. Value level management. We all talk about XLA, we all talk about SLA, we all talk about service level management, experience level management. I'm very happy that it exists. But to me, XLA, SLA, it's the same thing, because in an XLA, you have some user experience indicators. What we say in a value level management is slightly different. We say, okay, with the customers, for instance, we agree on, okay, now that we will use the digital product and services, what is the real level of value that you really realize from the digital product and services? When you say that some of the users will never use this, so we know that we already have constraints in terms of user adoption. So based on all these constraints, we have a transparent discussion with the customers and say, okay, what is the real level of value that we can really expect realized from digital product and services? So we don't talk about, what was the value proposed, but we agree on what is the value, the real value level that you can get. So this is about value level management. Then we have the governance, and the governance in this model is more about pollination. So that means being sure that people are not forced to apply good practices in value management, because that's what we want. We want to have an adherence on that, and some principles. One of them is, of course, the value centricity. The last thing I wanted to tell you, because I still have a couple of minutes, is the IT Value Index. Some of you know them, Bhupinder here. And why we talk about the IT Value Index? The Value Index, the IT Value Index, is to be sure that you can leverage from what you already have in ITSM space for the value management. Why I mentioned that here? Because in fact, the IT value index tells you, okay, we have a lot of ITSM practitioners. I have a lot of respected colleagues here that are much more better in IT than I can be, and very good in IT service management. And I said to myself, okay, that would be good to leverage from these ITSM practices, processes in value management. So we developed an IT value index where, in fact, you can see when you increase the quality, the maturity of your ITSM processes, what will be the impact on value. And that's what we did with the value index. So we have, in fact, for each of the main ITSM capability improvement, we have some example of when we automate the incident detection, we improve change approval workflow or knowledge article usage. For instance, what can be the value that we can get, or what will be the impact on value. So all what you know from ITSM, we try to make sure that we can leverage from that and increase the quality of your processes, but to see, in fact, how this improvement will impact the value. And that's what we have at the end of this. So, for instance, what we did here, and that will be my final slide, is that when you look at the different stages of this value management, we have along these stages our IT value index that will validate any kind of actions you can take to improve your quality, for instance, of your ITSM processes. This improvement will be part of the value backlog. And what is the impact on the value realized? So in each step of ever, you can use the IT value index in order to validate any actions that leads to sustainment or identification, realization, delivery, planning of value. And that is the end of my presentation. I really thank you for being with me today.